Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Aarna, host of Aarna's News, where on this podcast channel, I aim to eliminate the gender gap in the STEM fields by featuring inspiring female professionals and highlighting their stories and accomplishments to further encourage girls. Today on episode 70.
In places just in case. So you kind of but you never actually think that you're going to have them happen. But how you react to them, I think, is incredibly important, because you can either let things make you think negatively and turn you bitter, or you can think about this is an opportunity to do things different. And one of the advantages to having a few weeks off without work is I was able to take care of my dog. And so I think you can find blessings and positive things even in negative situations.
Today on episode 70, we are taking a different direction with this podcast episode. Joining me is Kathy Nelson, the remarkable host of Ordinarily Extraordinary, a podcast that shares empowering stories of women in STEM. Together, we're diving into the world of extraordinary women and their incredible journeys within the STEM fields. Kathy has a keen ear for captivating narratives and loves shedding light on the diverse perspectives and career phases these women navigate. Prepare to be inspired as we explore the choices, challenges, and triumphs that have shaped their extraordinary lives. So thank you so much, Kathy, for being here today. Before we dive into the questions, would you like to introduce yourself? Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Aarna, host of Aarna's News, where on this podcast channel, I aim to eliminate the gender gap in the STEM fields by featuring inspiring female professionals and highlighting their stories and accomplishments to further encourage girls. Today on episode 65, we are taking a different direction with this podcast episode. Joining me is Kathy Nelson, the remarkable host of Ordinarily Extraordinary, a podcast that shares empowering stories of women in STEM. Together, we're diving into the world of extraordinary women and their incredible journeys within the STEM fields. Kathy has a keen ear for captivating narratives and loves shedding light on the diverse perspectives and career phases these women navigate. Prepare to be inspired as we explore the choices, challenges, and triumphs that have shaped their extraordinary lives. So thank you so much, Kathy, for being here today. Before we dive into the questions, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me on this podcast. I'm really excited. I know it's taken us a couple of times to reschedule, so my apologies on that. Scheduling is always a fun part of podcasting. So I am a electrical engineer. I've been in the engineering field for 30 years. I spent 25 years at one company, went to a company for 2 years, went to a company for 3 years, got laid off last June, or literally a month ago, and just recently started my own consulting company. So it's been a really hectic and busy summer from that standpoint. And I think that's always part of our stories, is we have these career journeys that may take us on paths that we may or may not plan. And I think that's just part of life, and being able to embrace things as they come. And a lot of times you end up in places that you may not have planned to go, but I'm excited to now be an entrepreneur, to adding that to my list of things that I'm doing. So thank you for having me.
Of course. So my first question for you is, what inspired you to start your podcast, and what is its mission behind it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started my podcast during COVID, and when I talk about our sometimes our lives take paths that we don't necessarily plan on, this was a place that my life took a turn that I didn't plan on. So I got furloughed during COVID, and maybe a year before this, I had been sitting in just a small conference that I had gone to, and there was a woman on there that I think she was in marketing or something. I'm not really sure. It was a technical conference, but she was kind of like a lunch keynote speaker, and she was talking about having a podcast, and kind of maybe put that in the very back of my head. But I'm a technical person and very busy at work and blah blah blah. And then but kind of like percolated maybe for like a year. And then I got furloughed and I hadn't not worked since I was 15 and found myself with some time on my hands and decided to start a podcast. And I will say, like, one of the podcasts that I listened to a lot at that time was Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard, where he just had these, very like casual conversations. A lot of the people that he had on his podcast were women in Hollywood. And they would talk about the challenges of being female in Hollywood. And I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like every story of like every woman that I know that's in a STEM field. So I decided to just try doing a podcast. Like, so my very first episode was one of my engineering best friends. And I got it pretty well. Actually, I still use the same microphone that I had when I started, but um, got $100 microphone, did some research on how to start a podcast, and decided to just see what happened. I do very casual conversations. So I don't do like I don't send out questions ahead of time. I just do these very like casual conversations, really trying to put like people at ease and just like get them to talk about themselves, because I think it's really important that we share our stories and we get representation out into the world for women. What was my mission behind it? Honestly, like nothing. Like I had like no mission when I started. I have a mission now. I did not have a mission when I started though. What I love about my podcast is that there's two things that I think are really, really important. One is education on what we do for jobs, because as an electrical engineer, when I was going to school to be an electrical engineer, I had no idea what they did. I just knew that I liked math and science. Someone said you should go to engineering. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Turns out it was a pretty good field, and I've been pretty happy for 30 years, but I didn't know. So I do like to ask people what they do on a day-to-day basis. Super hard because most people do completely different things every single day. But that education piece, just so that people know, what do you do as an electrical engineer? And there's probably 30,000 different jobs that you can have as an electrical engineer. So just being able to bring that education piece. And then providing community for women and girls that are wanting to go into STEM, because sometimes you can find yourself in a company or a position where you're the only female. That happens still, unfortunately. And a lot of times you can feel very alone. You can feel like you're going through situations that you're like, am I the only one experiencing this? And having a community around that so that you can talk about that and share those experiences and go, oh, hey, like this person had that same exact experience. I'm not crazy. I think that's super important. So those are really my two missions: is education and community. Building the pipeline, keeping the pipeline from keeping women in STEM. 40% of women who go into STEM leave it. It's crazy. So those are my missions.
I love that. I mean, trying to build a community for people to retain in STEM is something really important, because a lot of people, they get into STEM and then a lot of experiences kind of go haywire, and males kind of get more opportunities, which is horrible, because us women, we are equally as capable as them. But creating a community is something very important to do, because it could help retain people and encourage them to stay longer in those fields.
Absolutely.
All right. And my second question for you is, how does your own journey or background in STEM contribute to your passion for empowering women in these fields?
Yeah. So as I talked about, I'm an electrical engineer and I worked in the utility industry. I work in the utility industry, but I worked at a utility for 25 years. So when I first went to my utility, I was the second female engineer at the company, but I was the first female engineer that was out in the field. And I was alone. And it wasn't necessarily like it was a bad experience, because the people that I worked with were pretty good. They were like, there are some things that weren't necessarily great, but I did feel alone. I did have the other woman engineer. She was more in the office, but she's also still one of my very best friends. She was my episode 2 of my podcast. And I will say, like, one of the things that I did at that time that I am very regretful of, that I try to, through the podcast, talk about and get women to not do. And I don't think, I haven't met very many women that do this now, but I hid a lot of parts of my personality that were very feminine. I like I sewed a lot of my own clothes. I sewed my wedding dress when I was getting married. I baked cakes. I didn't talk about any of that stuff. Nothing that was could like be construed as being girly. I learned to golf so that I could be out on the golf course with not just the engineers that I worked with, but like I worked with a lot of technicians. And there's always like a lot of tension kind of between technicians and engineers anyway. That was one of the best things that I did, though, actually, because that gave me an opportunity to um, just meet people where they were and be able to participate in things and have things that I had in common. But I wasn't necessarily my authentic self. And I think that's very important. I think there's a lot of value. There's so much value that we bring as women into STEM fields. But at that time, I mean, this is 30 years ago, being the first woman that's out in the field, it's just very intimidating to be there and just to you want to fit in, right? Like we all of us want to fit in, especially when you're younger. Like I've gotten better at that as I've gotten older, but you want to fit in, you want people to like you. Um and that is something that I hope to help women navigate or better than I did, I guess, through the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in the workforce anymore, or I'm not in the workplace at all, but so I don't really know being the only woman in, a room full of other guys, but I do know the other stories that other people have spoken about, like being the only girl in the room and things like that. So of course it's going to be really intimidating and lonely, and all of us we try to fit in if we're the only person, but just remember that you can be a trailblazer and allow for other people just like you to be in that same room because you have the capability to do so. So just remember that you have that advantage as well.
I think the other thing that's really important to talk about is not it's not just like that we are as capable. If women are not there, if people of color are not there, we are not designing our world for everybody. And that diversity is extremely important. So it's not just our capabilities are on par with men, which they for sure are, but having that representation is so important in order to make a world that works for everybody.
Absolutely. And my next question for you is, can you talk about a specific episode or guest that made you feel particularly aligned with your mission?
Oh my gosh, so many. You know, trying to think if there's any that like stand out. I'm going to talk about them generally because for a reason. Um, I have had the opportunity to talk with like the most amazing women that are so inspiring and have brought so much joy to my life and color to my life and inspiration. Um, so I talk about I got laid off in June and decided to start a company. I reached out to probably I reached out to maybe like 15 people in my network, and this is like my network from my work world and my podcast world. And probably 8 of the people that I reached out to were people that I had met from the podcast. And having support from them, getting advice from them, talking with them, just having this group of people that have become part of my network and part of my world. And what I call it is my village. It takes a village to raise an engineer. That's what I like to say. And being able to reach out to my village at a time that I really, really needed them and having them be supportive and having them give me advice and just to be there, honestly, sometimes to listen is absolutely incredible. And that's in addition to just, the fact that the women that I've been able to have on my podcast are just absolutely incredible women too.
Yeah, and this doesn't really just go to podcasting in general. Building a support system is incredibly useful and helpful for anyone because you have this system to rely on, these people that you can trust and get advice from. So try building those people that you can actually trust and rely on whenever you're having, hard times.
And good times. You want them there for your good times too.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And my question for you is, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced in pursuing your mission through podcasting, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, there's some that are there. So trying to grow a listenership is a challenge. Like I have these great stories. I have like these very inspiring women. How do I get that out to more people? I don't know. I'm still struggling with that. I actually went to a class on how to use social media to grow your platform, and the person suggested that I try TikTok. So I entered the world of TikTok and tried doing like little videos. I don't know that that has like done anything to increase my listenership. Um, the other thing that I am just now, well, I haven't started yet, that I'm planning to do is explore sponsorships, because it can be like during COVID. So I started at the very beginning of COVID, and we had no lives, right? During COVID, we were all shut up at home and not really doing anything. So spending at that time, I would say I spent 8 to 10 hours per episode between the guests preparing, oh, even probably more than that, like with the preparing and going through the questions that I wanted to ask and the research, and then probably 8 hours of editing. Um, and that's really hard to do. And so there have been times that I've thought about quitting because I've had a day job. I was only furloughed for a couple of months, and I have a day job, and trying to, find ways to edit faster, trying to find ways to do things differently. I really need to find a way to pay for someone to do the editing for me, because it's really, really hard. I've got 3 kids, and there's, like, so I think I told you I have been taking a break from podcast recording over the summer because I live on a lake. I live in Minnesota. We have 3 months of nice weather out of the year. I don't want to spend all my time podcast editing. And my husband got to the point, he's like, you're on your computer all the time, because I would be podcast editing for probably 2 or 3 hours a night after I got off my computer for work. And that's not really sustainable to have like relationships with your family and friends and things. And so but I have never had the time to go out and figure out how to get sponsors or try to get sponsors. So that's an area that I'm going to be exploring. Hopefully, because like I said, I have this change in my work life, and I'm kind of hoping to incorporate the podcast a little bit more into my technical work that I'm doing, and being able to like manage my podcast more so within like a daytime hours, or find someplace to outsource. Also, though, through my network, my wonderful network of people that I have met through the podcast, I have changed some of the software that I use. I use Descript, and I use River Place. I don't remember what it's called. One of those, to do recording and to do editing. And Descript makes editing so much faster. I'm probably gone from like 8 hours of editing per episode to maybe like 2. So that's been really helpful. But the thing that I want to do is I don't want to get so frustrated with the time and not having a life that I quit doing it, because I think getting these women's stories out is really, really important. But those are kind of the challenges, and I have not overcome them. Still working on it.
I mean, I totally love what you're doing because you kind of figured out the problem, and you tried to fix it. You went on TikTok, you posted those videos, but also you didn't really give up. I mean, of course, you took a break, but you wanted to kind of encourage more women in STEM and to build a community of people. So, you found these problems and you kind of started to work on it, which is really, really impressive because honestly, my editing doesn't take 8 hours. It takes much shorter than that. And I don't know if I could really do 8 hours for each episode, but I think that's really impressive. It's a great feat of you continuing to work on your podcast as well.
Important to get these women's stories out.
Yes. And my question for you is, have there been any role models or influential figures in your life who have shaped your dedication to empowering women in STEM? And if so, how have they inspired you?
More than I can even count or tell you about. And I will also say it's not just women. Like there have been like key men in my life too that have been very instrumental in both my career and also in wanting to empower women as well. Um Gosh, I mean, it's honestly, I will say my dad is probably my biggest cheerleader. He does not have internet. He does not have a computer. He does not have a cell phone. For probably my first 80 episodes, I would bring him my episodes on an MP3 player and he listened to all of them. And I don't know if he got tired of listening to my voice but he was like, I'm good. So, but he's always encouraged me through, to be an engineer, to my podcast, starting my own business. He's a huge champion. My mom, because my mom passed away a couple of years ago, and so she knows nothing about my podcast. She also had dementia for the last 3 years of her life. But my mom had a disability that was degenerative. So as she got older, she wasn't able to move, but her and I did trips to Europe, and my mom was just amazing. She was up for anything. And though and just seeing what she would do, and try, like, so many stories about her that are like incredible. It's so hard to get around Europe when you're disabled, when you either have a walker or a wheelchair, and we've done both. And just the way that she would persevere and want to do everything that she could possibly do was very inspiring to me and has shaped my life. And then, like, literally, I talk about this great network of people that I have, my two engineer besties, Tammy and Carrie, the coworkers that I've had over the years. There's a woman who, she's not in STEM, but she worked in HR, which gave me a whole different perspective. And I've ran, I don't know how many marathons with her, probably 6 marathons with her, destination marathons with her. She gives me a whole different viewpoint. I'm just going to give one example of what she would bring. And she brings a whole lot, because she taught me how to network, and the importance of a network and the connections. She was great at making connections. And that's now what I'm doing for people. But when I was talking with her one time, and I think I was complaining about going to a conference, and I'm an introvert. And I'm like, oh, I have to go to this conference and I have to talk to people that I don't know. And she's like, oh, I love going to conferences. I get to talk to people that I don't know. And just reframing it from oh, I have to talk to people I don't know, to oh, I get to meet people I don't know. I get to grow my network. I get to find out. It changes it, at least for me, it changed things dramatically. And I think that actually has helped with the podcast, because really what it comes down to in the podcast is I'm curious about people. I want to know their stories. I want to hear about them. And that curiosity is incredibly important. And it gets you out of yourself and out of your own head when you are an introvert. It's still tiring. I still need to have my downtime and my time to recharge. But people love talking about themselves, and people have really interesting stories.
I love that. People love talking about themselves and they have interesting stories. And as we end off this episode, my last question for you is, do you have any last pieces of advice or a message you want to share with the audience today?
Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about things over the summer, because I've had a lot of really abrupt changes. Changes in my work situation. I briefly mentioned about my dog. So my dog jumped off the boat when we were pulling my kids tubing about 20 miles an hour, and jumped off the front of the boat. We ran our dog over. He got into the prop. It was a very, very bad situation. And those two things happened really, really fast. Both my job change and this dog accident. And how you react to things is really incredibly important. I'm going to tie this back to both of them. So when I got laid off, I had a mission trip planned for 2 days later to St. Croix with my husband and my son, but to meet a bunch of other youth groups and stuff in St. Croix. And that got me out of what probably would have been me wallowing at home about oh, poor me, to serving other people, meeting other people. Really, it's a job, there's more jobs out there. It's not that big of a deal, but it would have felt like a much bigger deal had I not had that. But I had this opportunity to change perspectives and to react differently. And I have worked really hard to try to react positively as opposed to reacting negatively and keep it a positive experience. And I think that it will be. Anyway, I think that there's like a lot of like really great things have always come out of kind of shitty situations in my life. And then the thing with my dog and the reaction to that. And I don't know how I would have reacted had my husband not been there. So it was my husband and I in the boat, and then we had my two daughters and one of their friends that were pulling on the tube when this accident happened. And I could only drive the boat because after we picked up the dog out of the water. So my husband like grabbed the dog out of the water. It looked like he was attacked by a shark, like so much blood. And then I drove the boat back to the house, which was like probably a 20-minute boat ride. We had to bring the dog to the vet. It was awful. But it was a very like the reaction to that and my husband's reaction to that and how fast you have to react and what you have to think about is really important. And then both of those things also tie back to having support systems is incredibly important because I had great support systems for both. And neither of these things are things that I could have planned or foreseen, but you put things into place. You have your friends, you have your family, you have your village, your personal and your professional support system. I had a great vet that was in place. I had pet insurance. We'll see if they pay. In place. You have things in places just in case. So you kind of like, but you never actually think that you're going to have them happen. But how you react to them, I think, is incredibly important because you can either let things make you think negatively and turn you bitter, or you can think about this is an opportunity to do things different. And one of the advantages to having a few weeks off without work is I was able to take care of my dog. And so I think you can find blessings and positive things even in negative situations. Had my dog passed away, I might have a different viewpoint because he's going to be okay. But I think just being able to have that support system and being able to react in as good of a way as you can is important.
Definitely. Like whenever you're in a negative situation, just know that you can circumnavigate that. And there's going to be positive things that come your way. And building that support system and relying on them when tough things happen and also when good things happen is something that can really help you be the best version of yourself too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Kathy, for being here. I absolutely love talking to you, and I hope you have the best rest of your day.
Thanks, Aarna. It was really great to talk with you too.
And here are my 3 cents on this episode with Kathy. 1. Resilience and emotional well-being. A support system can teach you the importance of resilience and coping with life's difficulties. It can help you understand that you're not alone in facing challenges and that you can rely on others for emotional support. Learning to lean on your support system can improve your emotional well-being and help you navigate through tough times more effectively. 2. Emotional intelligence and conflict resolution. Learning when to react, or more importantly, when not to react, can enhance your emotional intelligence. It teaches you self-control, patience, and the ability to assess situations before responding emotionally. Understanding when to stay calm and when to address issues constructively can lead to healthier relationships and better conflict resolution skills. And 3. Community and belonging. Finding your village or community can provide a sense of belonging and purpose. It teaches you the importance of human connection and the value of diverse perspectives. This experience can help you develop empathy, open-mindedness, and the ability to work collaboratively with others. It also reminds you of the significance of giving and receiving support within a broader social context. Thus, that concludes the episode for this week. If you want to know more about how I relate to these amazing topics, then stay tuned for upcoming episodes. A free way to support this show is by leaving it a 5-star rating and a review on the player you are listening to. Let me know what you enjoy about this podcast, as it's a chance to tell me what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it too. Once again, thank you for finding me, and I hope we stay in touch with each other. Dito, you're listening to Aarna Sahu, the host of Aarna's News. Toodles!